Hello and good morning, everybody. Welcome to AFAPWA's third action circle in the political compass cycle. This is the third gathering. Today is October 31st, 2020. It is also Halloween, so happy Halloween, everybody. And it is also the full moon today. It is the full blue moon. And during this portion of the month, we are making decisions. We're making decisions. We're finalizing our plans. We are sealing our intentions. And so today, I'm really excited to start to make some decisions about how the political compass can be used in our real lives to foster good, healthy debates and conversations and really get to the bottom of issues and decide how to take good action. So good morning, everybody. My name is Abigail Twyman. I'm joining you today from my home that I share with my partner, Dustin, and our Dr. Zeppelin in our home on Prince of Wales Island on the northern end in Southeast Alaska, which is also known as Tlingit-Ani, the land of the Tlingit people, which they also shared with the Haida and Tsimshian people, specifically in what is the ancestral homeland of the people of Tuxacan or the Coast Town tribe. I am honored to share this space with my ancestors and the ancestors of those who came before me and were indigenous to this land I currently inhabit, who fill my soul with the fire that fuels my action. I am dedicated to remembering forward and passing along their immense wisdom for the benefit of future generations and the protection of our shared home. I'm also deeply honored to be joined today and share this space with all the beautiful humans and change catalysts who have been inspired and empowered to join our pod. I'm dedicated to use this privileged body and that I was born into and this platform to catalyze collective action. And I thank you for your dedication and commitment to taking action in the service of peace for yourself, your family, your community, and all inhabitants of Mother Earth. We are honored to again be joined by Alex Weisenfels, who is guiding this cycle, and I will pass the torch and the mic to you.
Thanks, Abby. Let's see, here we are. Setting intentions. The Action Circle is all about learning how to have more effective conversations around challenging topics, as well as effectively collaborating with others who share our vision, mission, and values. When we come to Circle, we assume the answers to all our questions are within the circle because we brought the right group of people together with a collective wealth of knowledge and experience. Our guiding theory is that our respective change efforts within our personal and professional lives, as well as our movements and organizations, have had limited impact on the overall trajectory of the data, and therefore it's incumbent upon us to adjust our approach. By bringing voices together and guiding the conversation in a new yet very old way, we have the potential to develop plans of action which are much more likely to get us to the end goal, a truly just, equal, and peaceful world, the way it used to be and the way it always should have been. Our goal is to catalyze the spread of action circles across the world in service of creating peace through collective action. So today we're going to do a bit of recap for the people who weren't here for the previous political compass concepts, and we're going to discuss what they can do on a more global scale. Now that we've gotten a bit of exposure to how they work in our personal lives and what we can do with them. Let's see, so the guiding question here is, what can people do when they know how to break down problems? Let's see, and then before we begin the conversation, it's important to establish the agreements that will guide us and protect us within the circle. These 6 agreements are a starting point for action circles, and they belong to the circle. They'll be reviewed at the beginning of every circle, and any member of the circle can propose additions or modifications. Number 1, while every action circle will be recorded and made public, the stories shared within the circle should be only shared in ways that protect, uplift, inspire, and empower others. Number 2, we listen for understanding, are mindful of how our words and actions impact the flow of the circle, and take responsibility for addressing any hurts we may cause. Number 3, we know we won't solve these complex problems overnight and are committed to learning and unlearning so we can be more impactful with our actions. Number 4, from time to time, we'll pause to regather our thoughts or focus. Silent counsel can be called for by any member of the circle by using the chat function. That's waste, why am I still talking? Or Gelmo, good enough, let's move on. Number 5, the chat function is reserved for contributions from those who choose typing as their preferred mode of communication, and for gems or quotes harvested by scribes, any member of the circle. Also, you're always welcome to pass by just saying pass or typing pass in the chat. And then number 6, whenever possible, we take a pause before speaking and use sound verbal behavior, e.g. measured in deliberate speech when sharing our perspectives within the circle. We'll make our first round of the circle to establish the agreements and check in. We've got introduction, land acknowledgement, acknowledge the agreements, and what would other people, like what do other people or what might other people fear about you? So I'll start. I'm Alex Weisenfels, an eccentric existentialist philosopher and high-functioning escapist, applied concept engineer. Some would call me mad, but I'll show them I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. I live here in Madison, Wisconsin, originally settled by the Ho-Chunk people. I acknowledge the agreements, and what people fear about me is I don't let them ignore things. Like I just peel away everything and raise questions that nobody wants answered. Well, okay, not nobody, but I raise questions people are very uncomfortable with thinking about. And let's see, and that's me, and I pass to Mary.
I'm Mary Wong, teacher of English as a second language at the University of Wisconsin and many other places over the years. I am interested in improving communication between people of various cultures, and I'm the mother of 2 amazing bicultural kids. I also live in Madison, the land of the Ho-Chunk, but grew up north among the Menominee. And what people are afraid of about me, I think most often, is that I'm pretty demanding, and I really don't like what I see as laziness in the discharge of important duties. And so I tend to get on people about that, and I think that's scary, makes me kind of scary. And I will pass to Donna. Oh, and I acknowledge the agreements, and I love them, and they're great.
I'm Donna, and I am a mother of 3 wonderful children that I've gave birth to, and then I have a whole host that I have adopted into my heart. I am a service coordinator for a children's mental health agency where I coordinate the services of needs for children with behavioral and emotional issues. I'm also, this is really exciting, a LIND Fellow, which is Leadership, Education, and Neurodevelopmental Disabilities for this academic school year at the University of Madrid. I acknowledge the land that I am on. It is the land of the Tlingit and Haida, and I'm grateful to be able to be here, and I hope that I leave it better than when I came. I agree with all of our agreements in the chat, and what people might be afraid of me. I don't think anybody would be afraid of me for anything, but I did have a coworker who moved into our area, and after about 6 months working with me, said that she was afraid of me when she met me because she thought I knew what I wanted and I was very confident in my position, which is totally opposite of what's on the inside. And she said I challenged her in the way she thought. So that's the only thing I can think of. And I am passing it on to
Hi, everybody. Happy Halloween. My name is Sheena Trait. I live in Tucson, Arizona with my husband and my 2 children aged 8 and 10, and my pain in the butt, but awfully cute puppy, Ruby, in Tucson, Arizona. Did I already say that? Originally inhabited by the Tohono O'odham people. I am, let's see, I acknowledge the agreements, and like Mary, I love them, and I love, Alex, how you read them today. And what I'm really struggling with, what do people fear about me? I have to be honest. I literally never thought about that question before in my lifetime, which is why it's such a good question. Because I'm always more afraid of others, I feel like. So there's more fear-based stuff inside of me of others for a slew of reasons that I'm working on. But I don't know, maybe for some of you that have gotten to know me, and maybe some people that are close to me in my lives can help me answer that question, and I can come back to you. And I pass to Abby.
Thank you, Sheena. I am indeed Abby, and my alter ego is Mistra the Mysterious. So if you ever see me dressed up in costume, and you will know who I am. And I'm actually have a plan for getting some of the kids that I work with to come up with their own characters and actually do some costume designs. I'm super excited about that. Anyway. I acknowledge the land that I am on. I am on the land of the Tlingit people. They shared with the Haida and Tsimshian. And I absolutely acknowledge and uplift the agreements and what other people might fear about me. My first thought was that I am never satisfied with the status quo. And I think that causes people to be kind of afraid, because like I'm always thinking about how to change things and improve things, and change can be very fearful for people. And I was also thinking back to when somebody, nobody's ever expressed that they're afraid of that. I just assume that they're afraid of that. But I thought back to when I was leaving an organization that I had been with for a while, and I was in a supervisory position. And one of my supervisors, as I was leaving, I was talking to them about what, feedback for me as a supervisor. And she expressed that she was always afraid of me because she thought that I was always judging her and was thinking that she was doing something wrong. And that was really interesting feedback to get as a supervisor, because I never felt that way, but that was the interpretation. That was always, she was like always on her toes because she thought she might be doing something wrong. So maybe it's the over perfectionist in me. I'll pass it to Alex.
Thanks, everyone. Let's see, here we go. So when coming to the circle in person, there's often one or more items placed in the center of the circle to serve as a focal point. Power of the circle is that, as opposed to common approaches to difficult conversations, which often turn to power struggles, here we speak from the rim of the circle into the center of the circle. And our voices have equal power because we all have something important to contribute. So here I have brought a picture that actually is symbolic of that. Oh, I can't share my screen. Oh, there we are. Thanks, Abby. Here we go. There we are. So I found this picture also on Pixabay, and it shows a bunch of people being puzzle pieces that can fit together into
Here's
something
Michelle.
bigger. Okay. Oh, sorry, did I pause it and it just didn't pause on the right thing? Did it work now? I'll just unpause it here because I'm not doing anything.
Yeah, you're good.
There we are. So a bunch of people in puzzle pieces, ready to fit together into something. Well, in this case, it's a giant rectangle, but I assume it's supposed to represent a big, impressive project. And they're all doing different things. It looks like they have different skills, different roles that they play. So that is the picture that I brought, and I also brought a song. It is not one that I sing. Let's see. Here we go. Still loading this. I should have loaded it at the beginning. There we go. Okay. So I need to share with the sound. So I'm going to turn that on. Okay. Can everyone see it all right? And then I won't be able to hear this, but let me know. Is the sound on? And so I chose that song just like the two from the previous weeks because it, well, in this case, it is more of an example of how not to build understanding and trust. But at the same time, it still demonstrates why doing so is important. So I think people can have their own interpretations of what exactly the singer wants to talk about. Let's see. Go back to the actual thing that I have here. Now for this, I'm not sure if we want to do a brief review of the concepts. Sounds like that would be a good idea. And then I do have two new exercises that somewhat build on the ones from the previous weeks. Let's see. I know, let's see, Donna, I think this is your first meeting in this action circle cycle, right? And then Sheena, you were at the first one, is that right? Okie doke.
Correct.
Sorry, Donna, I only caught one syllable of that.
Sorry, I said yes. This is my first one in this cycle.
Okie doke. Excellent. Let's go through the concepts then here. Let's see. Make sure I've got them in the correct order. Okay, so we begin with the fundamental liabilities, which allow us to describe problems. And then we also have trade-offs, which describe how people respond to them. And then we have the political compass, which describes just the groups of people that form based on the trade-offs that they're all willing to make. And then we also have the virtues that allow us to overcome liabilities in ways that are more constructive than just trade-offs. We'll just go through all of those really quickly here, and then we can certainly address any questions. Here we go. Okay, everyone see this one all right? Let's see. So 4 fundamental liabilities. First liability is scarcity. Scarcity representing a known physical obstacle. It's running out of stuff. It's a barrier that you can't get over, something like that. So limitations, you run out of gas, you run out of time, you run out of food, you run out of money, all sorts of things like that. And it can be also looked at as you could get over this this wall, but you need more resources. You need boxes to stack or something like that. And the important thing about this is that it's a physical limitation that is known. It is it's known in advance, so it's a form of order. And then going along with that, we have disaster, which is an unknown physical limitation. It's a wall that you hit because you didn't know it existed or you didn't know where exactly it was. And so this can be things like natural disasters. Obviously, we were talking about those landslides that were happening. Let's see, any sort of surprise. It could be a human mistake. It could just be something that people weren't expecting to deal with. But then we have more subtle ones, which I have to open those up separately here. Oh, sorry. Here we go, because this is a different type of file. Here we go. These are mental or motivational liabilities. And here we have stagnation. Stagnation being known mental obstacles, things like addictions or things like just hang-ups, anything that pressures people to not try to do something. A goal fails because a person does not have the wherewithal, the volition, or the scope of imagination to consider pursuing it, that sort of thing. So that would be stagnation. Things that oh, I should go back because I was doing the brief summary. So we got scarcity is running out of stuff. Disaster is running into stuff. Stagnation is people destroying themselves. And then we have conflict, which is people destroying each other. I'm going to pull up the conflict one here. And conflict just represents an unknown motivational obstacle. There's people who have different goals, mutually exclusive goals, and we don't know who is going to win. We don't know which goal is going to be pursued. There could also be an internal conflict. We want multiple things and we can't necessarily have all of them. So one of those things, or maybe none of them, will triumph over the others. Then, however, these are fundamental liabilities because we can't get rid of them without destroying conscious existence as we know it. Scarcity also represents stability. The world is pretty solid. These known physical limitations also prevent everything from evaporating. So scarcity is stability. Disaster is discovery. There are things about the world that we don't know. So a large part of conscious existence comes from discovering what we don't know about the world. And then we have stagnation is also identity. We know roughly who we're going to be when we wake up tomorrow morning. And so if we didn't have some obstacles to what we want and how we think, then we wouldn't have an identity. We wouldn't be able to predict ourselves. And then with conflict is also choice. We don't necessarily know what we're going to decide. We don't know what effort we're going to put into things. And so the process of discovering that is the process of choosing. So that covers the basic liabilities and what they mean for the world. Any questions about that so far? I'll close the window there. Mary, do you have a question? Sorry, I can't hear you.
I wanted to know what scarcity balances with.
Oh, scarcity is also stability. It's not really a balance in this case. There are balancing things, but in this case, what it means is stability exists, and scarcity is what happens when stability manifests in a way that we don't like, that it causes a problem for what we want. And same with the rest of them. Let's see. Make sense so far? Okay. Excellent. On to the trade-offs. I don't really have pictures for these. So people can respond to these problems in at least one of two ways. They can just ignore the problem and just do what they want and just let the problem happen. And when it does, they might be sad, but they don't really try and prevent it. That would be the under-regulated version. And then there's also an over-regulated version where we try to set things up in order to prevent a problem, and then we just run into it in a different way. We incur the same liability, but in a different form. So for scarcity, under-regulated scarcity is wastefulness. We don't conserve our resources. We just use them however we want, and then we won't have enough when we need them. Over-regulated scarcity is austerity. We just hoard resources and we don't get a lot of the benefits because we use them when we really need them, but maybe there are multiple places where we would want to use them and we can't because we're saving them all for just one purpose. And then for disaster, we have negligence being the under-regulated version. People just run top speed everywhere, and sometimes they hit a wall that they might have seen coming, or maybe they shouldn't have been running quite so fast, and they might have taken less damage from running into the wall. Negligence is just they don't try and prevent themselves from running into walls. But then we also have susceptibility. Susceptibility being the over-regulated version, where people hide from all of these disasters, and they try and just avoid all of them. But the unknown wall is a bit of an imperfect metaphor because disasters don't just wait for you to run into them. Disasters happen because things in the world are moving. And so if you stay in one place and a disaster hits you, then you might not be able to deal with it as well as if you had seen that before, maybe from encountering a smaller version of it. And so susceptibility is you're completely unequipped to deal with bad things when they do happen because you haven't been going around and discovering things. Then we have stagnation. Under-regulated stagnation is decadence. People get addicted to things. People do whatever they feel like, and they don't build up the willpower to work towards the big picture or to delay gratification. So they end up being bound to their own desires, just doing what they want when they want, and they can't do anything else. No long-term self-control, that sort of thing. But then over-regulated stagnation is dogma, where in order to prevent our minds from falling into a pit, we imprison ourselves. We don't allow ourselves to think certain things, And so that itself puts limitations on what we can think and what we can do. And then we have conflict. Underregulated conflict is turmoil. People just fight each other and use force. Whoever is the most powerful, or yeah, whoever is the strongest and most ruthless will triumph, and their will be done until somebody else takes them out. But then overregulated conflict is corruption. So in order to protect people from violence, we impose rules, but then we use those rules themselves as weapons, and the people who can acquire power and who are the most ruthless will wield their control over everyone else, everyone who doesn't have that nominal power. And so let's see. So those are the trade-offs. And I should note that these trade-offs, like people choose what trade-off they want to use based on how much they fear the consequences of the various trade-offs. If they say, okay, I think I could survive turmoil, I'm tough. I don't think I could survive corruption though. I'm not good with that whole lawyer stuff. So if somebody tries to use the law against me, I'm just going to beat them up. That's a trade-off that people feel they want to use, or vice versa. People think, well, I'm good with rules. I'm good with using the law to get my way, but I'm not very strong and I can't use weapons. So I'm less afraid of corruption because I can deal with that more. So that's how people do this. And these trade-offs can also interact. So one trade-off can, let's see, liabilities are kind of fractal. I'm watching how much I'm talking here because I don't want to just monologue for the whole thing. This is just a rundown of this. So liabilities are not isolated. Any given problem will probably have all of the different liabilities because they're aspects of reality. They're all there. It's just which ones are really causing us problems right now. And so they're kind of fractal because each of them contains the others. And so that means that each of them can amplify the others, or it can interfere with the others, depending on how things work. Like, let's see, like people could use dogma to prevent negligence, that sort of thing. Or people could use, what else have we got? People could use austerity to prevent turmoil, stuff like that. And my point is, they all interact. They can interfere with each other. They can worsen each other. So just the thing to keep that in mind. Let's see. So that said, any questions on the trade-offs that people tend to use for these? All right, sounds like we're probably good. So then there's two more sections of concepts to go into. There are 4 virtues that people can use to deal with liabilities in a constructive way, just obviating most of these trade-offs here, or well, obviating all of them for the most part. The trade-offs still exist in the short term, but in the long term, we can go in more constructive directions by bringing in all of our skills and all of our resources from outside the immediate context in order to do better than just trading off one problem for another. So for scarcity, we have investment. So we can spend resources, but not wastefully. So we can spend resources to get more of something. Here we go. Just realized I do have pictures for these. Not that one. Not that one either. There we go. And I need to start sharing again. Here we are, investment. So with investment, we don't hoard resources, but we don't spend them frivolously. We spend them in ways that will return more resources to us and increase our prosperity. So that's the constructive version. Let's see, here we go. Not sure if it has the other one also in here. Oh, there it is. Here we are. For disaster, we have preparation. Preparation can take the form of cautiously exposing oneself to a smaller version of a problem in a controlled setting, so that you actually know what the nature of the problem is. Or you don't necessarily have to know the nature of the problem if you know that you have a system which has a bunch of pieces, and you know that if one of those pieces were to be damaged or removed, bad things would happen. You could set up a contingency for that to happen without knowing where that damage could come from. And so you can have materials ready. You can practice drills to know what to do without panicking, that sort of thing. All of that goes into preparation so that you're equipped to deal with unexpected problems. And then for stagnation, we have transcendence. This was just the best picture I could find for it. Transcendence being that you can develop the self-discipline to consider all of these different emotions and goals and ideas, while at the same time not being captured by them, by the act of thinking them. So you can consider that something that might be a plausible way of life, but then you can say, well, I don't want to do that because that would cause problems in the long term, something like that. Or you can, well, I don't really have. I have more good examples, but that would just take longer. So basically, you don't have to fear decadence because you would choose to do things for long-term benefit rather than instant gratification. And then therefore, you also don't need dogma because you can protect yourself from addiction without limiting what you are allowed to think, that sort of thing. So transcendence was just the best word I could come up with. And not that one, just back over here. Here we are. For conflict, ethics. Ethics being the ability to stand up for principles. And let's see, I had a better explanation of it here because it's a very complicated concept. Finding solutions that align with everyone's goals, establishing not just rules, but principles that the community can understand and hold people accountable for, even when it costs us convenience, so that we can deal honorably for the good of society rather than just for individual gain or the gain of those people in our groups. So we're almost done with these concepts here, but any questions on these so far? All right, no questions?
I actually have one question, Alex. The last piece on conflict and how to manage that as a society in a constructive way. You mentioned ethics. and then you started elaborating on that. I'm literally taking notes because I missed last week, so this is the piece that I missed, I believe.
Oh, yes.
How can we get, so are you suggesting like like ethical guidelines that everyone adopt, or ethical guidelines within our own communities or in our own, are you looking big picture here, or zoomed in? And can you elaborate can you repeat again what you said about how to use ethics to help deal with conflict in a constructive way? Can you repeat that again?
Yes. And to answer your question about the scale, the liabilities happen at all scales, from just personal problems to the existence of civilization as we know it. And so too do these virtues. People can use ethics to deal with internal conflict, or also to deal with global conflict. And these are all very difficult. These aren't things like, you can't just invest in anything or prepare for anything. Like, just the fact that something is investment doesn't necessarily make it a good investment. They all take skill and calibration for the situation that they're supposed to solve. So these are just constructive directions that people need to go in order to rise above the trade-offs. Trade-offs are traps. Let's see, so we have ethics. In order to have effective ethics, people need to have principles. And these principles are based on reconciling all of the different goals that people have with each other. So I'm not necessarily prescribing any form of ethics, but we will know that an ethical system works when it can constructively resolve conflicts between people's goals. So finding solutions that align with everyone's goals, establishing principles that everyone can understand and that people will hold each other accountable to, even though it takes extra effort for us to do that. And so we can deal with people honorably, even when it goes against our individual interests. We can be honorable, uphold the principles, and thereby work towards the good of society, that sort of thing. So that's my picture of kind of the basis of ethics. All right, last set of concepts, home stretch here, and then we can start discussing how we can use all of these. And so we'll be going around the circle here. We have the compass itself, which is based on the trade-offs that people are willing to make in terms of public policy. Here is the actual political compass for reference. So people, we've got the standard political compass, which you may or may not have seen before, but I took this was a thing that we did in high school. We just went online and just took a test, and we got a little dot that went somewhere on this two-dimensional graph here, representing kind of our political leanings, more or less. But it's important to note that your position is going to be based on the context. Well, I'll get into that, I guess, once I explain the different positions. We can start with, on the left, we've got what people would call progressives, and on the right, we've got what people would call conservatives, and then libertarian and authoritarian just use the same words here. So let's pull up the other pictures here. To start with first. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so progressives deal with trade-offs relating to the physical liabilities. They deal with, I'm just gonna share this picture. They deal with, they prefer wastefulness and negligence because they are more afraid of austerity and susceptibility. It's a valid trade-off. They're dissatisfied with the status quo, and they want to make things better. They want to improve things. And so that involves extra expenditure of resources. It involves changing things, and maybe things will go wrong. And they will accept that as a price to pay, and because they really do not like the status quo. They think, okay, we can do better. And then they are opposed by the conservatives. Let me see if I can just go over to that one here. Here we go. They're opposed by the conservatives, who are more afraid of disrupting the status quo and causing bigger problems, because they are satisfied with the status quo. They think, okay, this is good enough. We can make this work. We know it works. It's tried and true. And if people are having problems with that, that's something that they just need to deal with. So they're more accepting of susceptibility and austerity than of the wastefulness and negligence. So that's just the trade-offs that they feel comfortable with making. And then let's see. Here we go. I have the libertarian picture here somewhere. Yeah, here we go. So libertarian and authoritarian deal with the motivational liabilities. Libertarians are willing to accept more decadence and turmoil, more individualistic. They prefer that people be able to do their own thing and be free on an individual level, rather than implementing policies to restrict what people are allowed to do. And so libertarians are more afraid of dogma and corruption. And so in order to avoid those, then they go in the opposite direction. And then we have, let's see, lastly, we have authoritarians. Authoritarians are more afraid of decadence and turmoil, and so they're more willing to err on the side of dogma and corruption in order to prevent those things. And so they have more collectivist policies and philosophies to try and preserve society as a whole at the cost of some of the individual liberties. And that is how this ties in with the political compass. It's important to know that these can be mixed and matched. This isn't about putting people in boxes. This is about describing people's philosophies on a particular level. And so depending on the situation, people might be in a different place depending on what they are prepared to deal with. So you might be more authoritarian when dealing with one of your children or a subordinate than when you are dealing with a peer or dealing with the government. It all depends on what you're prepared to accept. Same with the scarcity and disaster. What resources are you willing to conserve? You could have somebody who is economically conservative, or you could have someone who is environmentally conservative, and they're on opposite sides. Like one person wants to use more natural resources to protect the economy. One person wants to use money to protect the environment. And it's just a matter of which resources are they being conservative about. So you can turn this any which way. It's just a vocabulary. Okay, that was kind of the whirlwind tour. Let's see, we caught up to speed more or less. Okay, good. So now we can get into some exercises here. Let's see, go. So exercise. In the previous weeks, we did exercises like, here we go, liabilities that you can think of in your own lives, and then trade-offs that you can think of in your own lives. Let's see. And then that was the first week. Last week was pick a policy and look at the trade-offs on both sides and what people are willing to make, and then also to see if you can come up with a creative solution that will address all of the people's fears in a constructive way using the 4 virtues. We're going to do something a bit similar here. Exercise 1 is going to be, what sort of trade-offs do you see people making? Well, if you missed the previous week, you can do it on the small scale, but this week we can also do, what trade-offs do you see people making on the national or global scale? Just anywhere in policy itself. Where do different factions make different trade-offs? You can take like 5 minutes to think of things, and feel free to ask any clarifying questions.
Alex, another question. So a lot of this is very, okay. Policy, do you mean political policy?
Yeah, like laws and regulations. Now,
Okay.
because last week we did an exercise about what trade-offs do you see people making just in the personal lives, or what trade-offs do you find yourself making? So you can also do those.
Okay.
I was having trouble coming up with more exercises, so I thought, okay, well, last time we did the individual level. Now, how do people band together and try and impose their trade-offs on the world? So that was the new thing for this week. But yeah, feel free to do like a smaller version, trade-offs that you make. People still thinking of examples? We can take until maybe a couple more minutes. Do people need a couple more minutes?
I'm good, but Sheena and Donna,
Let's
it looks like
see.
Mary's good. Sheena and Donna, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm gonna pass on this one. I feel like I need to, I could spend probably 3 hours thinking about this. I don't know if I can really contribute. I'd really rather just listen.
Oh, sure. And maybe hearing some of the other examples will help. Let's see. Okay. So, examples. Oh, so I have, just to start off with, I have an example of policy regarding a trade-off. There are a lot of laws pertaining to susceptibility, in that there are a lot of laws that are trying to protect people from their own carelessness, their own negligence of how to protect themselves from things. And so things like, I'm actually trying to think of what the best example would be. Because now that I think of it, the example I have is the fictional one with The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the instructions on toothpicks, although that might be real. Not sure, but I guess in general, laws trying to protect people when really it should be their responsibility to protect themselves, because they should know, like, oh, this system has this capability. I'm going to say this is a weak example because I should actually compile more actual examples to support my opinion. Otherwise I may need to revise my opinion, but it is a potential example. Laws promoting susceptibility, but I'm gonna, that was just the first one I came up with, and I'm going to say I don't stand strongly by that, because now I don't know why I think of it. So, intellectual honesty, moving on. And I pass to Mary.
So, Sheena, I totally get what you're saying about feeling like I can think of 70 examples and my mind wants to go in every direction. So I kind of went with the obvious thing, which is COVID response in the United States and elsewhere, because I think it kind of touches on all these different things. I mean, obviously, we've got a disaster on our hands. It's a real disaster. And a lot of people say, well, like, how could we possibly have been prepared for this? But if there are people who were prepared for it, there are people in the United States who are prepared for it, like small communities who, have epidemiologists in them who are like, hey, this is going to happen probably sometime in the next 10 years. We're going to have a pandemic because this is the way these SARS viruses have been trending. We had H1N1, we had SARS, 1 and 2 basically, and Asia dealt with those. And this is one of the reasons why these Asian countries are doing so much better, because they had these, I forget what Alex called it exactly, but kind of like trial runs. They got to work on the pieces. So when I talked to my brother in Singapore, he's like, yeah, we're doing fine. But remember, we've had practice. We've done this twice now. In 2006 and again in 2011 or something like that. Like, there were these big breakouts and they had large numbers of people in the hospital, and they had to think about, when you've got all these people on respirators, how do you triage? So they dealt with the little pieces. And in the United States, we pretty consciously chose, well, initially we did have a pandemic preparedness program, which Trump ended shortly after he became president, because what do we need that for? So that, I think, is an example of, oh, I get so lost in the, like, my little notes and lists here. Negligence. That's negligence. That's saying, even though I see the evidence that this is likely to happen, even though my statisticians and my epidemiologists tell me that this is not a thing that is unforeseeable, I don't see it happening. I'm just going to forget about it. So there's been negligence, and I'm not just saying Trump, but on the part of the US government as a whole, and on the governors of states being kind of unwilling to face that this is really tough. And how that interacts with some of these other things is, okay, what did I have? I made so many notes, now I won't be able to take any. So things like that COVID mask response, you had an initial warning that we should leave them for people in who worked in hospitals, and the fact that they actually do protect against illness was downplayed. So people were told, well, you don't need a mask. They need masks in the hospital. Masks don't really do that much good. And so there was I think, an emphasis on kind of the status quo. Which one is that? The status quo one. I thought I wrote everything and now I can't find it. So we had scarcity. We had a scarcity of equipment that was going to help us get ahead of this problem, and that impacted conflict, because instead of being honest and ethical about and looking at what masks really do and do not do in terms of spread of the disease, they're like, oh, we have this scarcity problem and we need to emphasize what this means for hospital workers and de-emphasize what it means for individuals. So there's confusion around that in terms of policy that's kind of lingering. I mean, you still have people quoting things that people said about masks back in March and April that are demonstrably not true, but that were said in a very public way back then. And people are like, well, why did you change your mind? Well, that's a good question. Why did they change their minds? They changed their minds because the scarcity abated. We started to have masks available. People started to figure out how to make the right kind of masks. And there was an inability to adjust to that new knowledge about masks and what they can and cannot do. And then by that time, though, you also had a lot of emotion around it. And that seems to me to fall into this like stagnation area, where some people started to really feel like, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of being in my house. I'm sick of having my kids in my house. I want them to be back in school. I want to be doing my job. I want to go to the bar and hang out with my friends. And all the way down from that. I mean, that's the extreme view. But I think even like, hey, I want to see my grandkids. I want to spend time with my grandkids, whether that's safe for them and me or not. And so people not being encouraged by public policy to always make the right choices, and not being clearly told, look, these are the choices that you need to make, because we're trying to balance it against overregulation. We don't want, Americans in particular hate dogma. They hate being told, this is the right way to do this. This is what's going to work. And they're immediately suspicious of that. I think with good reason. We've often been told, don't do drugs, don't do any drugs, don't ever do drugs. Marijuana is a gateway drug. If you smoke weed just once, you're gonna have a life of horror and crime. You know, so we're a little suspicious of messages like this. Yeah, so I mean, wow, that's not even helpful, I don't think, what I've said, but it's my sort of trying to put this around sort of the US response to COVID. And yeah, it's not super organized, but I think I'm starting to get the ideas. I guess that's the goal. So I'm going to hand it off to Donna.
I'm not sure what I want to share. And I'm an ostrich. I like to stick my head in the sand. That's why I like living in the middle of nowhere in Alaska, because I just feel like I'm one voice that gets drowned out. And so I don't pay a lot of attention to the greater political, because it just causes me a lot of internal stress. And so I really don't, because I mean, like she was talking about the mask, I see both sides. I can clearly see both sides of the issue. And so I struggle in that area. I was thinking more about the individual suggestion and the trade-off. And I was thinking about myself personally, what the trade-off I don't know if I'm doing this correctly, but not speaking up against the higher educated equal members of the team. And I have an unfortunate trade-off in not using my voice, and things stay the same. And I disagree with those things, but they still say the same. So I'm not sure if that fits what we're trying to do. Okay, Sheena is passing, so I'm trading off to Abby.
Okay, so for the global or national policy topic focus that I chose was education. Shocking, I know. And so kind of what I did was I went through each of the fundamental liabilities and tried to identify which trade-off I felt kind of we're leaning towards, and then thought about how like the political compass and which one might kind of address those areas. So I'm gonna stick with me, because I was like, this hurts my brain in the best of ways to think about things in these terms. So for education, in relation to the liability of scarcity, it seems to me that the people in charge of education are focused more on austerity and hoarding resources. So there's not enough money. There's never enough money. So we've got to maintain tight control of this budget, and we can't spend money on any other things. And so there's a lack of investment in the education system that, I don't, like on the budgetary side of things, there's a lack of investment. And then within the education system, we're dealing with the fact that there's not very many resources. And so we're just always responding to that scarcity. And I think, from the progressive viewpoint, it's like that is leading to this really unacceptable status quo that, people want to change, but it's kind of butted up against the kind of that stronger, the people in charge are the ones who are kind of trying to be austere and hoarding and not allowing things to change. In relation to the fundamental liability of disaster, kind of I feel like within the education system, we're ignoring and creating a situation in which we're very susceptible to disaster. So this COVID kind of, I think, laid that to bear, in my opinion, is that, one, pandemic. And it's like, you know, nobody's being educated. We're not making progress. We're actually kind of like looking under the covers of what I think that, you know, where people were really ignoring the problem and acting as if there wasn't a problem. You know, it's like, oh, we've got this education thing, and we've got our standards, and look at our scores, and not really looking any deeper than that, you know, that overall thing. Overall, where it's like, you know, the focus was on our budgets. Oh, we're staying within budget. You know, great. But not really looking at the fact that if we're not addressing the needs of the kids and the families, then that's going to produce long-term issues. And so, you know, what I was thinking about, like what we're wasting, while we're not wasting resources in terms of money, I feel like we're wasting time. We're wasting time and we're wasting energy doing things that don't really make sense. You know, I feel this very strongly, like as a teacher who I'm all constantly being asked to do things that, like, this doesn't have a long-term impact. I'm wasting my time sitting in front of a computer writing a progress report based on nothing just so we can check a box. So, and that kind of leads to the liability of stagnation, where like within the education system, we've got this dogma. This is what education is supposed to look like. We've got these standards, we've got this curriculum. We need to be in the classroom. Kids need to be in their seats doing these things and, you know, on task. But it's very like rigid and, you know, very kind of imprisoned into that like straight and narrow. And then you have kind of the push from the other side, like the libertarian kind of viewpoint, where it's, you know, people want to kind of like throw out the rules, like this isn't working for us, we need to make changes, or we shouldn't have as many like rules and regulations because it's leading to that stagnation. And then in relation to conflict, I see that there's just kind of within the education system, there's just this constant air of like turmoil, which causes like leadership to use force to get people to comply with things. Like things are, you know, constantly seem out of control. There's, you know, issues with kids, there's issues with families, there's funding issues. And so rather than kind of, you know, going further and looking at like, how can we ethically make decisions and make sure that everybody's needs are met, it's more of a force. Like that's, you know, I don't know if the issue is like, that's going to take too much time or too much energy to put the right constraints and checks in place. And so there's a lot of force being used as opposed to trying to develop a system of ethics to address the challenges. So that's where my brain has gone so far with this.
Awesome. And Sheena, you said that you have an observation?
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I'm not sure if everyone now, but I observe and experience and witness so much polarity in the world right now, which is why I admire what you're sharing with us so much, Alex. And so when I read your political compass, automatically I was like, oh, which one am I? Which one is this person? And it's not about, you know, your clarification. It's not about putting people in boxes. And what Abby just spoke about and everyone just spoke about, you're right. You can't just, you know, if societies and human beings, we don't fit in boxes. There are contexts with which it is a compass that, you have these trade-offs that seem to apply, but it depends on what policy we're looking at. You could totally be, leaning toward one direction over here, but, it just kind of sort of depends on what you value as a citizen, and a human. But that it's everything is so polarized. People are thinking this or this, and it's just it doesn't work that way. So that was it. Just the polarity of how things are, and how it's so hard, and that this is a way, if everyone was familiar with this, we could come together and we could problem solve, and we could understand each other better, and we could have productive conversations. It's pretty awesome.
Thanks, Sheena. That productive conversations thing brings us to the next exercise. Thank you all for sharing the observations that you had from this exercise, because it's very encouraging to know that these concepts help people with understanding problems and how to go about not only understanding the problems themselves, but understanding how other people respond to them and what we can do to respond more constructively. And so exercise, here we are, this one. Ultimately, these concepts are about, well, okay, I thought of something to say, but I think I'll say it for the closing, so we'll skip that for now. I'm going to postpone that, and we'll just dive into the next exercise, which is about, for any of these trade-offs that we notice, either on the policy level or on the personal level, what kind of institutions might we create, or what kind of habits might we develop in order to use virtues to handle these in a more constructive way? What would the purpose of this institution or habit be, and what methods would it use? And as a hint, most of these virtues deal with outside the box resources, outside the box thinking, meaning to apply things from outside the immediate situation, just factors that might not be obviously relevant, such as just sidestepping the problem entirely by identifying the true goal and achieving it some other way, compromising by offering someone something to compensate for them not getting their way immediately, that sort of thing. All sorts of things. We can take maybe 5 minutes to think of things for that.
Alex, can you quickly list the virtues again, just by name even?
Oh, yes.
Chat or something? So I have too many pages of notes.
Oh, yes. Let's see. Oh, okay, yes, outside the box solutions. So, for instance, one way to resolve a conflict in an ethical manner is to bring in some outside form of compensation. Like, let's say, um, say it's a conflict over land. That happens a lot. People fight over something that cannot be divided or replicated, and it's a very tricky thing. But if somebody's willing to make a concession on an unrelated basis, I'm not sure how well this would work in reality, but it's just a theoretical example, and you can substitute various things. So I'm not saying, yes, this is the right way, but an example of somebody trying to resolve it outside the box is, okay, well, this is a zero-sum game. Only one person can have this MacGuffin. So what if I were to offer you something else in exchange for the MacGuffin, something that is outside the context of the situation that you also want, rather than just trying to be the person to have this? And that works more often than people think, depending on what's at stake. Maybe it's not even about the MacGuffin. Maybe it's about dignity, or dignity. Like, right, we will honor your right to this, or something. I'll come up with something smaller. Does that begin to make sense in a kind of disjointed way?
So before I give my own example that I was thinking about, I want to give a really specific example that sprang into my mind when Alex talked about paying people for losing somehow in a trade-off. It's been over a decade now, maybe closer to 2, since they reintroduced wolves into northern Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And a big problem was that the wolves will go after cattle. And the farmers are like, they want to shoot the wolves. And they do shoot the wolves. And so the DNR in Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula said, look, if a wolf attacks your cow and kills it, we'll pay you for the cow. And so they said, you just need to show us a photo of the destroyed cow. And so the farmers started doing that, and they started sending photos of the cow, and the DNR would write them a check. Boom. Okay. So that wolf killed your cow. Great. Well, of course the farmers are like, oh, okay, well, this cow was killed by, a huge coyote pack, or actually a hunter shot my cow by accident. They'd send the picture, DNR still sends the check, because to them, that amount of money is worth it for, like, even if there's a bit of fraud involved, even if there's a bit of corruption around this rule, the trade-off is worth it to them that wolves are repopulating the northern part of the state. And then the farmers are totally cool with it. It really was that simple a problem. They just get upset when the wolves kill their cows. Problem pretty much solved. So that's an example of what Alex was talking about. I started to think about like conflict, which is probably the area here that I have the most trouble with. Like the others I can look at, but like conflict, any kind of conflict with anybody that I care about at all really gets to me. So I thought, okay, go with conflict. And I find that I use Facebook a lot to maintain relationships, but that's hard in a political year, especially many of my high school classmates are much, much more politically conservative than I am, and they publish things that really bother me sometimes. So I've kind of developed, I didn't realize I developed this strategy until I like thought about this consciously, that I tend not to respond to posts that are polarizing, that are negative to me, that are meant to be negative to me, basically, you know, and sort of challenge that. But I always respond to posts from those same people where there's something to agree with. So for example, I have a friend who lives in Colorado. He keeps posting pro-Trump stuff, but she also does lots of videos of the animals, turkeys and deer and elk, and, you know, in her backyard. And I always respond to those to emphasize what we have in common, what we both love, what we both share, like these common values. Another person who is a little hard for me to take, but is part of this like larger friend group. We all went to school from first grade through 12th grade together. But she recently published an obituary of a guy we both loved. And so I spent some time talking about like, oh, wow, yeah, he really was a great family man. You know, you gotta love that about him. So emphasizing these values that we have in common. It's a really small thing, but like Sheena, I'm really so deeply saddened by this polarity and what it's doing to all kinds of relationships. And I feel like this is like small but constant like mending and refocusing on ethics and what we have in common rather than on, you know, these things that are tearing us apart. I would like to pass then to Donna.
I'm going to pass, but I wanted to say that I really liked your example of how even though your friends have posts that you don't like, that you make sure you respond to the posts they have that you do like. I really, that's an inspirational thing to me. Thank you. Passing to Sheena.
Hey folks, passing again on this. I don't know if my brain's just not working well or something, but this is also very heavy and so many things, and I don't want to use my language unless I have enough digestion of the content. I feel like it would be irresponsible of me. So I so deeply want to have this conversation. So I don't know. I don't know if we can create like another gathering, maybe either with this circle or outside this circle, where we've had time to digest it and have more conversations around all of this, because I want to include loved ones in this conversation as well, and friends. And so, yeah, I think I need more time to say things in a way that's just and thoughtful, and so I'm going to pass.
So I have a lot of thoughts about institutions, things we could do, things that focus on the virtues that could more effectively address the challenges we are facing within the education system based on the trade-offs that are being made or have been made over time. But the first one, so I'll just focus on one, is in relation to the liability of disaster. And the tendency that seems clear of the susceptibility to disaster created by ignoring of the problems. My first thought goes to, the first step is to acknowledge and accept that there is a problem and that what we're doing and what we have been doing is not working. And to me, the first step in that acknowledgement is to really look at the data around our education system and what's really happening, because I really think that's where a lot of the problems stem from, is that there's almost this hand waving that goes on about, like, oh, kids they're in class and they're making progress, and but when you really look at what's going on, it doesn't match the persona that's being put out there, the mask that is being put forward about our education system and how people are being taken care of, and is not happening at the ground level. So I think kind of like that first step is to kind of create a system that allows us to really look at the problem and just acknowledge it without the emotionality and pointing fingers. It is what it is. We've been investing in other things and ignoring this problem and ignoring our children and our families, but it's something that we can't ignore anymore. Yes, thank you, Sheena. I just bought that Kindle book this morning.
My example is, not sure if it quite counts as outside the box. This is where I haven't been plugging the nonprofit organization, but I can do that here. Andrew Yang's Humanity Forward is pushing for universal basic income, and I consider that to be an investment in people so that they can make decisions for their lives and their communities that aren't based on fear of scarcity, fear of a lack of income. And so I don't think it will be on its own sufficient to change the world for the better, but I do think it will be necessary, because alleviating that scarcity will remove people's physical limitations, and then they can actually invest in themselves and in their communities. And we'll need people like us to help people communicate with each other and learn how to do that effectively. Yeah, I do think that universal basic income will make it more possible to do that. So thanks so much for all of these excellent examples and thoughts for the future here. And yes, I do agree, Mary, we should have a homework assignment for next week. So let's see, what these do leading into the homework. I'm going to say I need to look this up to see if it's already a thing, but otherwise it could be a new razor that is that's named after me or the toolbox or something. But the Hanlon's razor is never attribute to malice what could easily be attributable to stupidity. But I think we need a new razor that says never attribute to malice what can easily be attributable to fear. And so what we need to do, I'll start over. People get afraid and they latch on to what they think the problem is, and they latch on to what they think the solution is. And we need to use this razor to peel back what they say about what they want and what they say about what they want to go away, and get to the fear itself, and then we acknowledge that fear and respect it, because it is a legitimate fear. All of these liabilities, all of these trade-offs, they are real things that people have trouble dealing with. And so we acknowledge that fear, and we can express our own fears afterwards, after they're comfortable that we understand them. We can say, I understand. I am also sometimes afraid of those things. Right now, I'm afraid of these things in this situation. And that builds understanding. And then we can propose plans that can address all of our fears that they may not have thought of, these outside the box, constructive, virtuous solutions. And that builds trust. They know that we are thinking of things that will help them. And so the homework assignment for this next week, there'll be one more meeting in this action circle cycle, and we can discuss the results here. The homework is going to be, think of someone you seriously disagree with about something. Could be personal, could be political, but they want the situation to go one way and you want to go a different way. And so your efforts are going in two different directions. So talk with them, learn about their fears in their words, and then you don't have to use these words. You don't have to use like my vocabulary words, but just you can use these as tools. The razor, you can use these concepts as a razor to figure out what they really fear, get to the heart of that, and then paraphrase that back to them. Say, okay, it sounds like you're afraid of this. It sounds like the reason you're asking for this is because you actually are really concerned about this. And so once you've confirmed that you understand the root of their fear and the heart of their values, rather than just the specifics, peel away the specifics, then you can, well, that's part one of the homework assignment, learn what they truly fear. And then part two is then think of something that may address those fears. And if you feel it will help to explain your fears to them, then I would recommend, I should start over. There's a 3-step process. Understand your values, understand the other person's values, frame the situation constructively. So I do recommend understanding your own fears first, because it makes things easier. But then the first thing you do with them is you learn about their fears and you confirm with them that you understand. That builds understanding. And then if you find it helps to explain your fears, you can do that. Then the third thing is frame the situation constructively. You can offer them, like, would it help if we did this? Like, would it, as an alternative to what you propose, would it address your concerns if we did this instead? And you'll use your knowledge of both of your fears to propose that, and that builds trust. And it may not be the perfect answer at first, but it allows you to move forward. It allows you to collaborate together on solving the problem. So that is the homework there. Any questions? I know that was kind of long-winded there. Let's type this up here.
Can I just like restate it?
Yes.
Because I think I missed some stuff.
Let's see. Homework.
So I have, think of someone you seriously disagree with about someone. The situation, whatever the situation is, to go one way, you want it to go another way. So talk with them, learn about their fears in their words, and then use that concept as a razor to get to the fear that is at the base of what they want. And then I think I get a little, so once I've confirmed that I understand the root of their fear, No, I got lost. Part 2 is thinking of something, I presume something that, wait, what do I do for part 2? I got lost.
Yeah, sorry, these are ordered in the way that makes most sense to perform, but conceptually they do seem a bit mixed up.
So I think the first thing I really need to do, which you didn't say till later, is to make sure that I understand what my fear is around this.
Right.
And then I would confirm that I understand the root of their fear. And then what do I do with that knowledge? It's the next step. Thinking of something, and that's what I think.
Let's see. There we go.
Am I trying to think of something that alleviates their fears, or am I going back to the virtues and sort of examining them one by one and like trying to face my fears and understand their fears in terms of these virtues? Or how am I using what I've done for the last 3 weeks to attack this issue or to deal with this?
So here's the order in which I suggest to do this based on how it would probably work effectively. First is figure out what the context is, the situation. So you're thinking of someone you disagree with personally or politically. You disagree about what to do about a particular situation. You want different trade-offs or things like that. So that's one. Just pick a context and a person that you disagree with. And then step 2 is understand your values pertaining to that situation. What do you fear? And then step 3 is you actually go and you talk with them and you listen to them about what they say they want, and you use these concepts to peel away what they say they want and figure out what do they actually fear? What are the trade-offs that they're making using these tools in the toolbox? And then you confirm with them. It sounds like you are worried about negligence, or you're worried about corruption, and they may not know what that means because these are very abstract words, but say, okay, so you're worried about people getting into power and using rules unethically in order to oppress people, or worried about people being careless and running into problems that didn't need to happen, stuff like that. And they say, okay, yes, and build understanding. 4, you share your fears with them. If that'll help build more understanding, it demonstrates vulnerability, that it's not just that you think something is better, but that you are afraid of something bad happening. I was told my internet connection is unstable. Did I blip out, or can you all hear me? Oh, okay, excellent. Let's see. So yeah, shares vulnerability so that you're not just proposing a policy, but you actually have fears. And then 5 is frame the situation constructively. Now that you both know what you both fear, how can you use the virtues to do something that works for everyone? And that builds trust. And yeah, it would be good. I think.
So I was just going to say, Alex, are you like responding to Sheena's question in the chat?
Oh yes, sorry. The question about can we do mock practices of this? I think that is probably the logical thing to do for next week, because I don't really have anything planned for that. But I wish we could do that before we do the homework, because that would probably make the homework more successful.
Yeah.
So
what I'll suggest is that Alex and I had a conversation earlier this week about a specific issue that came up online with 2 kind of very diverse views. And so, and that also leads into kind of the conversation I wanted to have afterwards regarding kind of where to take action circles. So I would love to just kind of put a pause on that and wrap this up for today. And then when we close out and we move into kind of the offline section, we'll have that conversation. Because I think that's an important thing to do. But outside of this part. That works for everybody.
Sounds good. There will be plenty of opportunities, so I would recommend picking something for the homework that you're comfortable with, something that's relatively low stakes, that that you're already comfortable with dealing with normally, but this might make it a bit better, or something where you just don't care if the conversation doesn't go anywhere. That's all right. We can do an actual workshop sort of thing next week, and that will close this out. So thank you all so much for listening to me yammer and sharing your own ideas and thoughts based on these concepts and how you apply them to what you see. And I'm hoping to take this set of tools to many places in the future, because I think that humanity really needs it. And yeah, thank you all for coming. And we're not really going anywhere, but I'll say bye for the audience watching the recording, and tune in next week.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, everybody. And we will see you next weekend.